My honors English teacher suddenly started giving my papers failing grades, insisting I was an idiot. But when I secretly gathered proof of her bias, the school board stepped in. Back in high school, I was a quiet student who got decent grades and loved reading. Because of my freshman teacher's recommendation, I spent years on the honors English track. Then, during the second semester of my junior year, I was placed in classical literature. I had already read most of the typical Greek and Roman reading list on my own, so I expected an easy A. But then I met Miss Umbridge. She put on a sweet facade for the school, but she was downright evil. For some unknown reason, she instantly decided she hated me. I suspect it was because I occasionally nodded off in class. I had an undiagnosed thyroid issue at the time and woke up at 5 a.m. every day for swim practice. Whatever the reason, she made it her mission to destroy my grade. Our class grade was based largely on essays. Since I was on the student newspaper and was a decent writer, I wasn't worried. But when our first paper was graded, I got a D. I was absolutely shocked. I asked Miss Umbridge after class what I did wrong, since her feedback was minimal. She smirked and told me my assessment was uninspired. I asked her if she could show me an example of an inspired paper, and she told me to come back during my study hall. I thought she would have reference materials or helpful tips. Instead, she spent the entire hour telling me how stupid and incapable I was. I left her room crying. She hadn't given me a single piece of constructive criticism, just pure insults. My friend, who went on to be our class valedictorian, offered to help with my next paper. We spent hours on it together. My friend never got below an A- on anything. Yet when I handed it in, Miss Umbridge gave me another D. My friend was absolutely furious. She took my paper to her AP English teacher and asked him to review it, pretending she was submitting it to a writing competition. He read it and said it was fantastic, easily A+ work. Then my friend asked him to look at my original D paper as well. He said that one was great too, probably a solid A-. My friend was convinced Miss Umbridge was intentionally grading me unfairly. She urged me to tell my parents or a counselor. I decided to try one more time, but this time I would force Ms. Umbridge to help me. I braved her office during study hall 3 separate times before the next paper was due. She reviewed my drafts and gave me specific revision tips. She wrote all over my papers in red pen. I took careful notes and made every single change she requested. By the time I turned it in, I had 3 drafts covered in her red ink. I still got a D+. She smirked and mockingly congratulated me on my improvement. That was the final straw. She was giving me terrible grades on purpose. I was incredibly angry, and I decided to prove what she was doing. I took my paper to my student newspaper advisor. He wasn't an English teacher, but his students won awards every year. I told him I was struggling and asked for his honest feedback. He read it and said it was a solid A. Since our high school didn't let students easily change classes, I had to get creative. The athletic director was a family friend, so I requested a meeting with him and my swim coach. I told them I was in danger of losing my eligibility to swim because of a D in English. When they asked to see my papers, they read them and looked completely confused. They couldn't understand how my writing was worth a failing grade. They immediately brought in the student vice principal. The vice principal asked if I had ever asked my teacher for help. I smiled and handed him the 3 revised drafts of my paper, covered in Miss Umbridge's red ink. He frowned. He pulled the AP English teacher and my newspaper advisor into the meeting. Both teachers were asked to grade the papers independently. All 3 drafts were rated an A- or better. My dad was called in, and he was absolutely livid. He demanded I be moved to another class and that Miss Umbridge be put under review. The administration tried to defend her, and a massive shouting match broke out in the office. Finally, they scheduled a confrontation meeting with Miss Umbridge for the next morning. The next morning, we all gathered in the office. Miss Umbridge arrived looking smug, clearly expecting to explain why I was just a terrible student. She told everyone I should be demoted to basic English, claiming I didn't have the brain power for honors. When the vice principal asked why she hadn't helped me, she claimed I had never once asked for her guidance. That's when the vice principal pulled out the 3 drafts and handed them to her. Her face went completely pale, then bright red. She panicked and started shouting that I was a liar and that the handwriting wasn't hers. Things got so heated that I was escorted out of the room while they continued screaming at her. A few minutes before classes started, I was called back in. Miss Umbridge glared at me with pure hatred as she left. The vice principal informed me I was being moved to basic English immediately. My failing grade would be wiped clean, and my new teacher would grade me only on future assignments. My new teacher turned out to be Miss Honey, the head of the English department. She was a veteran teacher in her 60s. After years of honors classes, her basic English class was incredibly easy. But I refused to let anyone think Miss Umbridge was right about me. I worked harder than ever, finishing assignments so fast that Miss Honey asked me to tutor other struggling students. At the end of the semester, Miss Honey called me into her office. She recommended I return to Honors English for my senior year. I panicked, but she gently assured me Miss Umbridge wouldn't be my teacher because she was being let go. Miss Honey explained that the administration had placed me in her class on purpose. They trusted her to find out the truth. Miss Honey told me I was an exceptional student who clearly belonged in honors, and she apologized that her class hadn't challenged me enough. I burst into ugly, snot-nosed tears. I didn't realize it, but a part of me had actually believed I was stupid. Today, I work in a writing-based career, but I still obsess over my work because of her.